Obesogens are a group of chemicals that have been shown in studies to disrupt our metabolic health. Plastic is convenient, I know, but that convenience is costing us. I think last year they published a study that showed the chemicals that are released from plastic is costing us in healthcare costs to the tune of $250 billion in 1 year.
Dr. Vivian Chen is a medical doctor with 15 years of clinical experience. She's board certified in the UK in both internal medicine and family practice, and she now lives in California. Dr. Viv's journey to root cause medicine began when her world turned upside down after the birth of her baby girl. Her newborn daughter was hospitalized with symptoms no doctor could figure out. Through her own research and dedication, Dr. Viv was able to help her daughter to fully recover. She also realized that many years of chronic fatigue, acne, brain fog that she was experiencing was due to environmental toxicity. And this opened up her focus to study root causes of conditions, something that she had never considered being trained in conventional medicine. I've got so many questions for you, and I want to start by talking about obesogens. All right, this might be a new term for people, but we need to know about obesogens. We need to know what they are. We need to know what they do in our bodies and what the sources are. But can you start off by sharing what are obesogens?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much for shining a light on this. Obesogens are a group of chemicals which have actually now been recognized by the NIH. So if you go to the NIH website, kind of their division on environmental health, there's actually a publication by them on obesogens. So it's science-backed now. When I first started talking about this 7 years ago, a group of MDs clubbed together online and called me, I can't remember, misinformation spreader. But what I was talking about back then were this group of chemicals that have been shown in studies to disrupt our metabolic health and therefore increase the propensity to gain weight. So that's why they're called obesogens. And they can interrupt our metabolic health in a number of ways by damaging the mitochondria, which is kind of the powerhouses inside of our cells. And if your mitochondria is not working optimally, then you can't take the food that you eat and translate that into energy. And therefore, the food that you're eating is being deposited and stored as fat. So that's one of the ways. The other major way is endocrine disruption. So a lot of these common ones are BPA, found in thermal receipts, plastic bottles, phthalates, again, found in plastic packaging, food packaging, personal care products, and PFAS, this group of forever chemicals that we hear endlessly about, it seems, in the news now, which are commonly known to kind of come from non-stick cookware, but it's actually found in a lot more than that. So these chemicals have actually been monitored by CDC in Americans, and they're found in 90 plus of Americans. So it's ubiquitous. We're all exposed to these chemicals, and they've been shown in studies to increase our susceptibility to weight gain.
This is already, again, like you just said, it's so much data is coming out now. It's being found in sex cells, in urine, umbilical cords.
Right.
The list goes on and on. There's really, in a strange way, no safe place to hide here on planet Earth. We're kind of like in this glorified snow globe. And the best that we can do, and that's where another reason we're going to get to and why I have you here today, is really support our body's detoxification systems. Right. Because we're going to be exposed to this stuff because it's just so pervasive in our society. Thank you for mentioning about the NIH, again, acknowledging that this is a thing and this is something for us to be aware of. But you know how it is, like a lot of these entities are so late to the game, and just even the veil that happens in the degrees of honesty and obesogens, like carcinogens, right? These are cancer causing agents. These are obesity causing agents outside of this normal realm of this kind of caloric management equation that I was taught in my university of like, this is how you get fat. This is like an epigenetic influence, an epicaloric controller in a way, because it alters the way that our bodies interact with these compounds?
Yes. So the segue into that, and the reason why I kind of first started looking at that was I found a study published in 2016, a big study done by the Canadian Institute of Health Research. They took data from NHANES, so that's the kind of CDC monitoring data of Americans' nutrition and health status. They took data from 40,000 Americans, and they looked at how much they ate, what they ate, their weight, and how much they exercised. And they found that in 2006, if you ate the same amount of food, the same types of food in terms of macronutrients, and exercised the same amount, you are 2.3 BMI points heavier than if you were in 1988. So what's causing that? So, in other words, if you ate the same diet and you exercise the same amount, you would weigh 10% more today than you did in 1988. What's making that happen, right? I'm not saying obesogens are the only things.
Yeah.
There's more stress for sure. Our food is not the same as what they were. There's a lot more inflammation causing foods. But to not talk about obesogens is missing a big elephant in the room.
Oh, thank you for saying this. This is really, again, so this is adjusting for diet and exercise, which again, we usually attribute weight gain and weight loss to those things. Adjusting for those things, something happened over that time span where suddenly people were heavier.
Exactly.
And that's crazy. But what is there any other? Is it just us as humans?
No.
Is there any
it's
other
wild
impact?
animals. Animals in the wild too. They're getting heavier too.
That's banana. So Yogi the bear is just out here just accidentally getting thicker.
Right. And
because of the
pets
environment.
too.
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So there's something in our environment for sure. And we need to kind of wake up to it. I know this conversation is very uncomfortable. And trust me, I don't want to be having this conversation most of the time. It can be depressing, but I think it's important to be aware so that you can start doing something to protect yourself.
Yeah. Listen, I've seen this, and I know you've seen this as well. People like, it's just there's another thing to be worried about.
Right.
The world, just everything is bad for us. Yeah. Like our world is very different right now. And this is about being aware. We don't have to be inundated, but if you can do small things, because what is happening is an accumulation of small things that's causing our poor health and oftentimes influencing our metabolism and looking at, what is our goal, right? So if we're wanting to lose body fat, or if we're wanting to avoid having cardiovascular disease, we've got to be mindful of our environment and just make small changes along the way. And I want to start in the kitchen. All right. I want to start in the kitchen because this is a place where health is really cultivated potentially, or poor health is cultivated. But the kitchen is a cornerstone. It's really a centerpiece of our universe as people, you know? And so I want to talk about some of the common kitchen favorites that we might need to make some adjustments on. Yeah. And one of these, it's so deeply ingrained in our culture, is aluminum foil. All right. So this is a common kitchen favorite. Let's talk about aluminum foil.
Yeah. So studies have shown that if you use aluminum in your kitchen, so for example, utensils, cookware, aluminum foil, you are walking around with double the amount of aluminum in your blood compared to someone who doesn't. And when they look at white blood cells in the same sample where they kind of tested for aluminum, the white blood cells are showing oxidative damage, DNA damage. We don't really know what that translates to in terms of hard outcomes yet, in terms of diseases. But for me as a doctor, I don't think that's a good thing, right? Oxidative stress or oxidative damage is kind of like rust, right? It's the creation of these free radicals, these chemicals that now can damage our cells and cause DNA damage. That's not a good thing.
Yeah. We don't really think about, I know that I didn't think about aluminum foil. Of course, I know a ton about cookware and all that stuff, But aluminum foil seems so harmless and just like, non-threatening. It's just like this sheet of thing. It doesn't seem like it can be damaged or like end up in my food or in the environment. But with that being said, we know that aluminum has significant leaks, tons of studies with neurodegenerative conditions.
Yes.
Right. So this isn't just something to just like ignore. But with that being said, if aluminum foil, if we're using that for cooking purposes, is there something better that we can be using?
I think it depends on what you're using your aluminum foil for, right? So studies show that if it's wrapped around meat or anything acidic or anything with salt, or if you're combining your foil with another metal. So for example, you have your steak sitting on a stainless steel tray and then you cover it with aluminum foil. All of that increases the leaching of aluminum into your food. And they've shown that the content of aluminum in food wrapped in aluminum foil can be up to 40 times higher than food not wrapped in aluminum. So ask yourself, do you really need to use aluminum? First of all, what does that actually achieve? Are you trying to wrap in moisture, or is it you just don't want to clean up, right? If it's because you don't want to clean up, maybe rethink that, because the impact on your health could be long-term, it's cumulative. Now, if that's your only exposure and you're not exposed to aluminum anywhere else, it's probably not a big deal. But I think the WHO safe limit for aluminum per day is 2 milligrams per kilogram per day. And CDC estimates that Americans are exposed to about 10 milligrams per kilogram per day. So we're exceeding what we should be exposed to every day. And over the long term, if that's not coming out of our bodies, that could then lead to downstream issues we don't know about yet.
So what are some other options that we can use? So, for example, if aluminum foil makes stuff easy, like if somebody's trying to slap some bacon, into the air fryer or into the oven or something like that, and putting on a dish, a tray. What could they use instead?
I would say unbleached parchment paper is probably a better choice. So there's no heavy metal there. There is a layer of silicone on those usually, but as long as the contact is not, for a long time, or you're not putting it at extremely high heat above 400, you're usually okay.
Got it. Okay, so parchment paper, but again, being mindful of the type of parchment paper that you're using as well.
Exactly. But you could just put it straight on a stainless steel tray, right? And then I know the cleanup, but spray it with some good non-toxic all-purpose and let it soak, and it should all come out.
Yeah. That's the convenience factor. You just said it too. It's like that's one of the things that really gets us a lot of times.
Yes.
You know what? This reminds me too. My wife was actually upset because somebody broke. She's got this somebody gifted it to us, a little wooden cutting board. And so, she was putting the dishes away and saw that it was broken. And she was like, who broke my cutting board? And, but then we also had this plastic cutting board that was there as kind of the alternative because we didn't get rid of it yet. And of course, after having this conversation, I'm going to send it to her. Let's talk about plastic cutting boards, another kitchen favorite.
Yeah. Most people think that plastic cutting boards are better because they're advertised as antimicrobial and you can put it in the dishwasher. But that's probably one of the worst things you can do, because when it's advertised as antimicrobial, it's often coated with something called microban. So that's a solution of antimicrobials that can contain endocrine disruptors like benzalkonium, quaternium products. And then secondly, studies have shown if you put plastic into a dishwasher, you're increasing the likelihood of leaching of microplastic into your food. So you're increasing the ingestion of microplastic when you're putting the food on that plastic cutting board and cutting it. And thirdly, a study just published last year showed that if you are using a plastic cutting board, you can be ingesting anywhere up to 50 grams of microplastic per year. So that's about 12 credit cards worth of plastic, up to that. So it depends on what type of cutting boards, what you're doing with your boards, what you're cutting, that all kind of contributes to how much you're ingesting. But, that's a pretty crazy amount.
Holy moly. All right. So the alternative for the plastic cutting boards, which again, it's very just kind of integrated into our culture, what should we be using?
So studies have shown that wooden cutting board is actually more antimicrobial just naturally compared to plastic. So you don't need to be coating it with microban or anything. Just wood, straightforward wood is naturally antimicrobial. And what I suggest people do, because the first question people ask me is, well, I cut meat on my cutting board. Like, how do I disinfect it? Keep a board for meat and one for your veggies and fruits. And I would suggest wooden for both. But if you really don't like the idea of wood and you must use a plastic, then don't put it in a dishwasher. Hand wash it. And don't cut so hard. So in this study, they showed that if you're cutting carrots on the plastic board, you're generating more microplastic. And that makes sense because if you're cutting something really hard, you're making deeper cuts, right? Like if you hold up a plastic cutting board, you see all the scratch marks. That's all the microplastic that's now in you.
Yeah, we think if we're not seeing like a bunch of shredded pieces of plastic, it's not there, but in reality, when we're cutting into that cutting board, that plastic cutting board, is absolutely getting into our food.
Yeah, so it's the nano plastics that you can't even see. That's 1,000th of a millimeter. You can't see that. You can maybe see the microplastics. That's less than 5 millimeters.
Yeah.
But most of it you're just not seeing.
So again, this is about being informed. And next time you buy a cutting board, get yourself a wooden cutting board. Just phase. I'm a big fan of phasing out because we still have like a larger plastic cutting board and a small one, but we also have multiple wood ones too. Minus her favorite one that got broke because it was like a little one that she cuts like fruit on for my son.
I'm very attached to my cutting board, so I know how she feels.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about another very common kitchen favorite, and just leaning more into these plastics is plastic storageware. So I saw recently there's some data that came out about microwaving our food in these plastic containers and how much microplastics was getting into our food. Yeah,
pretty mind-blowing how much is released during microwaving because you'll see on the bottom of these plastic bowls or boxes, it says microwave safe. But what it means is that it just won't melt in a microwave. But in that particular study you're referring to, they showed that per cubic centimeter, the box is releasing millions of microplastic and billions of nanoplastics per cubic centimeter. So how big is your box usually? Much bigger than that. So and that's for microwaving 3 minutes only.
Right.
It's not even that long. So whatever you do, if you have to store your food in plastic, then transfer it out onto a plate before you microwave it.
And also this study found too, even storing it in plastic at even at cold temperatures, like putting it in the freezer, for example, there's going to be leaching of that plastic into your food over time. But again, and this is the thing too, plastics are they're everywhere, right? So integrated into our culture. And there are smarter ways to interact with plastics. And I want to ask you about the different types of plastics in just a moment. But, just being mindful, especially of heating them, especially heating up food, putting hot food directly 100%. Into plastics. You want to avoid that. Yes. But there are also so many cool alternatives now. We've just been phasing out over time. We still got some plastic containers. Yeah. But we've got, I'm a big fan of these stainless steel containers that we use a lot. And they've got like silicone lids. So I'm a big fan of those. Yeah, I love those. I love glass as well. It's heavy, I know. Plastic is convenient, I know. But that convenience is costing us. I think last year they published a study that showed the chemicals
that a release from plastic is costing us in healthcare costs to the tune of $250 billion in 1 year.
Wait, say that again.
So the chemicals that can leach from plastic is costing us in health cost $250 billion a year in 1 year.
This is ridiculous.
And it goes back to the obesogens we're talking about. So we're seeing increase in obesity rate, diabetes, insulin resistance, fertility issues. People are brain fogged. They're fatigued. The list goes on and on. Increased risk of cancer, autoimmune diseases, all of these added together is what we're experiencing. But nobody's putting the pieces back together.
Yeah. Wow. And that's such a great analogy with putting the pieces back together because, plastics and Legos and things like that. But it's so interesting. This is a newly invented substance, really,
Yes.
Looking at the evolution from fossil fuels, but just like the plasticizer chemicals that are used to form it into all these different things that we can make. But what is not being fully appreciated is that human cells, there's a really funky interaction when associating with these plastics. And they tend to permeate our cells and we're plasticizing ourselves.
Exactly.
Really.
Yeah. And I think the problem is that the plastic industry doesn't have to disclose what they use to make plastic. When scientists and chemists have tried to kind of figure out what's in plastic, they've reverse engineered in labs what kind of chemicals come out of these plastics. When they analyze it, they estimate that there are about 10,000 different chemicals being used to make plastic. And a quarter of them are of concern. So they're either shown to be harmful to humans or possibly harmful to humans.
Thousands of chemicals. Again, newly invented stuff, huge social experiment.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about the different types of plastic because there's this recycling number that if people notice, maybe just like on the bottom of the container, for example, and I think it's like 1 through 7,
yes.
I believe. Can we talk, what is that number? What does that
so
indicate?
Initially they're kind of used to help you know which one to recycle, right? What trash can to put it into. But it can actually tell you what it's made of and what potential harmful chemicals might be in the plastic. And a very helpful way I use to memorize this, because it's overwhelming, there's so many and different names, is 1, 2, 4, 5, all the rest are bad. So 1, 2, 4, 5, all the rest are bad. 1, 2, 4, 5 are the safer ones. They can still leach phthalates, though, endocrine disruptors. But at least they don't have things like styrene, which is a known carcinogen, or benzene, known carcinogen, leaching out of them. 7 is usually polycarbonate. So that's what a lot of people are familiar with in terms of BPA. When they look for plastic, they say, oh, no worries. I found a bottle. It says BPA free on it. So I'm good. But what they don't realize is that the industry actually just swapped BPA for another very similar bisphenol from a family of over 100 different bisphenols with very similar properties.
Like bisphenol S, for example.
Yep.
And
BPF, those are the kind of common substitutes.
Mm-hmm.
And, the amount of BPA America allows Americans to encounter, I'm talking about the regulatory agencies, allow Americans to encounter is hundreds of times more than Europe, where I kind of trained and came from. So in Europe, the daily allowance, or it's kind of the daily safe limit, but set by EFSA, European Food and Safety Authority, they set the limit at 4 micrograms per kilogram of body weight per day. That's the old limit. Last year, they lowered that to 0.2 nanograms per kilogram per day. That's based on all the science and the data coming out, showing just how harmful this chemical can be for us. And yet in the US, they allow 50 micrograms. So that's 250,000 times more than what they allow in Europe.
Oh my gosh.
So either the regulatory bodies in America don't read scientific research, or there's something else going on that's making them turn a blind eye, and they're not protecting our health.
This was one of the cool things about you, and why I'm excited to talk to you, is that you have that perspective. We were talking about this before the show, of coming from the UK health system and seeing the differences here in the US. Can you share a little bit about some of the big differences that you saw, in particular, like with universal healthcare? Let's talk about that.
So many differences. Number one is in Europe, or definitely in the UK where I come from, we take the precautionary principle towards new things, new chemicals being used. So over there, manufacturers or companies have to show that a chemical they intend to put into a product has been shown to be safe in humans. But here, it's, everything goes.
We have to prove that it's bad.
That's correct.
Us, right, essentially, to
you
prove
have
that
to
it's bad.
prove that it's bad before they'll remove it. So they will just experiment with you. Like, we're literally living in the biggest chemical experiment right now as humans. And when I talk about this, I get pushback from my conventional colleagues, MDs, who say there's no human trials or clinical trials. And yet we're seeing study after study of population studies, right? They say correlation is not causation, it's correlation, association. But if you see association after association after association in study after study that's replicated and repeatable, that starts to build a really strong, compelling story. And we should be waking up to that rather than saying, I'm happy to play Russian roulette with my life, with my health. But that seems to be the approach here in America, unfortunately. And I feel more strongly since I've moved here that I need to speak up, first of all, to advocate for my family, and also for the public. And I'm seeing a trend right now where, there's this grassroots movement, right, of consumers like us. When we vote with our dollars, that's how we get companies to change their practice. Yeah. We're seeing green beauty, clean beauty in Target now. And that's because we're voting with our dollars. That's not coming from policymakers. We do absolutely need policymakers to make better policies for us based on science and not turn a blind eye. But we as consumers can also do our part.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk about the universal healthcare, like when you came here and seeing that, again, this is out of pocket for the citizens and just the difference that you see with that?
Yeah, it's honestly heartbreaking when I first moved here. So I practiced in the UK, firstly as an internal medicine physician. Then I went to dermatology, and then I ended up doing family practice. I'm paid one salary by the NHS, which is the National Health Service. And that care provides free care for all. So for most people, medications are free. To see me, it's free. To, have operations, everything is free at the point of care. And this is kind of born out of the need that health shouldn't be for the wealthy, right? And I very, very strongly believe that. And then when I move here and I see that people who are in lower income do not get the same access to care as wealthier counterparts. In fact, there's a huge disparity in terms of toxin exposure between socioeconomic groups, right? People in the lower socioeconomic groups are exposed to a lot more. There's these super fun sites where toxins are basically being dumped, and they're all near lower income areas. That's not okay. And on top of that, they also don't have access to healthcare. So, for me, I used to go on runs when I first moved to this country, and I would cry because it's so sad for me to see. It made me so angry. I still get very emotional thinking about it because I have people reach out to me online saying they can't afford to see their doctor. They can't afford chemo, cancer treatments, life-saving treatments. I don't know what the solution is here, right? Because we seem to be spending so much money on healthcare, and yet we rank almost near the bottom of all Western societies. Something is not working here. And I'm just so grateful for your work because you kind of really bring the truth out and all these important root causes and the education to people who don't have access. And I feel like that is absolutely key. When you have education and you're aware of what you can do, now you have the power to change that.
Yeah. You just said it. That's really the catalyst for this work is I lived in Ferguson, Missouri. I didn't know about any of this stuff. And, the thing is just having access even to the information, I could start to make different decisions because, of course, we need top-down change, absolutely, but also bottom-up change and me just being able to make new decisions.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that because, again, your perspective is so valuable. And, you mentioned this before the show, and it's just like it hit me again when you said it, that healthcare costs is the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States for our citizens is because of healthcare expenses. I
don't see that in the UK or in the European countries at all. And we spend way less. I think it's magnitudes of orders less than what we spend here. And we rank higher in terms of health. So I don't know what's happening here, but whatever we're spending our dollar on, we're not spending in the right places.
Just one more aspect of your experience working in the UK and then coming to America. Shout out to Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall. But coming here and seeing the differences. And you mentioned that you had a salary, right? Whereas our system here, there's a lot of incentives for physicians, incentivizing more surgeries, incentivizing certain prescriptions, incentivizing certain treatments, and getting paid based on the stuff that you're doing, right? What is your perspective on that? Do you think that might influence decisions that might not be in the best interest of the patient?
Yeah, I'll tell you from my experience as a patient. So when I'm a patient in the UK, I trust everything my doctor says to me is in my best interest because they are paid one salary and that salary is not determined by what they prescribe me or what procedure they send me to. So I know whatever they're telling me is evidence-based, best treatment that they know. But when I moved here, I went to see my doctor and they told me I needed all these million different scans, different treatments and procedures. I question why, because the protocol here also seems very different, right? I feel like there's a lot more investigations here, whereas in the UK, we rely on our clinical skills to examine a patient, spend time with the patient, come to a diagnostic kind of criteria of what's the most likely, what we call differential diagnosis. Then we base our investigations and kind of scans, bloods, and lab works on that. Whereas here, there's just a lot more investigations involved. So when I moved here, I found a lump in my breast. In the first year, I think, the stress of moving. I was astonished what I had to go through to get that lump investigated. Right. First of all, I went to my doctor. Then they sent me to an ultrasound. I tried to find out how much that ultrasound would cost me. And they said they couldn't tell me. That was the first shocker. I said, what do you mean you cannot tell me? So if I go into a store, I've never been told, I don't know how much this thing costs. I know how much it costs and I can decide, can I afford this? Do I want to buy this? No. We don't know how much it will cost. Depends on your insurance. I can give you an estimate. And the estimate is something like between $50 to $500. That's a big range. And then there were all these other investigations that normally I wouldn't be getting if I was in the UK. Anyway, I went through it because it was, a big deal for me. But in retrospect, I thought that's probably not what would have happened in the UK. So I think that's like kind of a really big difference is, and I understand why too, right? I went to medical school. I didn't pay a penny for my tuition. 0. So I graduated medical school, no debt. I worked to support myself, so I had 0 debt. Most doctors in this country come out with hundreds of thousands in debt. I think the average is something like 250,000, maybe even 300,000. That's a mortgage right there. You have to make payment on that. You have to pay back that money. So, and if you're working in a system that incentivizes these codes, and that's how you get paid. And there's no code for giving nutrition advice. There's no code for getting to the root cause. What are you doing? You're treating the Band-Aids, right? That's what you're getting paid for. So I'm not criticizing MDs here. Like, they're all doing the best they can in the system that educated them, and they believe they're doing the best. But it's not until you kind of look outside and the picture of the mainstream medical training that you realize, gosh, there's a lot more out there.
Yeah. And I'm just, again, a big proponent, and for everybody to just look at the results. Just look at the results of the way that our system is constructed. You mentioned this. It's getting close to $5 trillion now. From last year that goes into the U.S. healthcare system. And we rank at the bottom of developed nations for our health outcomes, right? So you just mentioned all the testing and investigation is not leading to better outcomes. That's just what the data shows. We had world-renowned gastroenterologist, Dr. Emerin Mayer here, and he works out of UCLA, and he was sharing a recent analysis that was done. And he was like, my colleagues are going to be mad at me because they make a lot of income in doing colonoscopies. He was just like, it's really an archaic thing, at this point, because we have far better methods that are non-invasive or minimally invasive. By just doing stool tests can find far better data as far as, potentials for cancers or some other forms of diseases. He's like, this is just not necessary unless we check some other boxes. There are some instances. And he was like, again, my colleagues are going to be mad at me because I'm saying that this is now obsolete, really, to do this procedure, that it becomes like, okay, at this, and they're trying to lower the age on when you're supposed to go get a colonoscopy done. He's just like, it's an obsolete procedure, but it's so built into the system. And there are billions of dollars made from this treatment. Do you think that the physician, again, they're trained and they've, built their career doing this particular procedure, and they might have seen, we caught something, right? We caught this thing early, whatever the case might be.
Right.
But are there better ways to go about it that are non-invasive, that probably are less expensive? And that's where we get into this place of, let's be honest about the current state of things, how we're doing things, and the outcomes. I don't want to diminish any form of treatment, right? If colonoscopies were like activating superpowers, I'd be all for it, unlocking your mutant X gene or something. I don't know. It's fine, but that's not what the data shows. There are better methods that are less expensive and less invasive as well.
Well, I think they're lowering the age for colonoscopy because cancer is occurring in younger and younger people, unfortunately. And that kind of comes back to this root cause conversation we're having right now about the environment that's making people have cancer earlier, because it cannot be genetic, right? Genetic doesn't mutate that fast.
Right.
Something in our environment.
Because they're just going to be like, we just need better testing, right? We just need sooner testing, catch it early.
Right.
Instead of asking, why is it happening?
Exactly. And talking about testing, we're so good at testing, but when you get the result, how you interpret that result can really affect the trajectory of that person's health. I'll give you an example. My sister-in-law, she goes to her doctor, gets her annual labs done. Part of that is HbA1c, fasting glucose, right? Monitoring her for prediabetes, diabetes. Fasting glucose 105. That's prediabetes. What does the doctor say? Don't worry about it. You don't have diabetes yet. We'll just keep testing you once a year. And when you're diabetic, I'll give you a prescription. Not the conversation that should be happening, which is, let me look into why you developed prediabetes. At this point in time, this may still be reversible. Let's talk about how we can do that and prevent me having to prescribe you a medication in a few years' time. So the testing is almost a waste of time because the testing is just so a doctor can prescribe. It's not so we can act and help, prevent diseases.
But that's going to require change in the system and change
medical education,
in policy and education. But again, the cool thing is, even as we're sitting here having this conversation, many of these changes are happening, at least in micro ways in different institutions.
Yeah.
The education is changing. There's a lot more focus, for example, just on students learning about the microbiome,
yes.
right? So there are significant changes being made from these conversations that reach sometimes millions of people. And a lot of times, over the years, just finding out people that might be listening to the show that work at Harvard's, microbiology or immunology department or something like that, and being able to affect the education, the coursework, at least, again, just having this awareness that there's more to this.
Yeah.
Now,
definitely.
I want to circle back because in this conversation about health and, even cancer, looking at some of these plasticizer chemicals being influential in that. Another thing that is a common, not just kitchen favorite, but something that we go out here in the streets with, which is our water bottles. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about plastic water bottles.
Yeah. So most people think that bottled water is cleaner than tap water. But a study has shown that bottled water contains more microplastic than tap water. So a liter of plastic bottled water can contain up to 250,000 microplastic particles, according to a study. So that's magnitudes of order more than tap water. So if you are drinking bottled water, you're better off going to buy a water filter. It's going to be cheaper in the long run, and it's actually better for you. You might as well just be drinking tap water, honestly, if you're buying bottled water.
And also, when you came to our studio, as soon as I saw you and I went over and you was like, oh, it's not nice water,
yes.
Because they had it bottled in glass.
I was super impressed.
For you.
I snapped a picture and I was going to share it on my Instagram and say, guess whose studio I'm in?
we treat you nice here.
Yes, yes.
Now, with that being said, you've treated me nice. Before I even met you, you sent me this red light therapy device, which I've been using. And the science is amazing. This is one of those things that, I've got a friend, he's probably listening to this episode actually right now. He's got a great gym here in LA and he's got a red light bed. And it's like one of these highlights. It's very expensive. All right. And I just been kind of just put in the back of my mind, of course I know some of the basic science on it, but you know me. I mean, I'm pretty neurotic about stuff and I'm going to when I get into it, I'm going to dig. And this really prompted me to start to look into some of this data. And I've just been like, this is amazing. This is amazing. All the potential benefits here with something, again. Well, let's talk about it. Why is red light in particular? What is it about red light that is so impactful on our cells, in particular our mitochondria?
Yeah. So red light, think of it as basically a charger for your mitochondria. So the things we talked about earlier in this podcast, they damage the mitochondria, right? Stress damages our mitochondria. Ultra-processed foods damage our mitochondria. Lack of sleep damage our mitochondria. And we're every day carrying a mitochondria debt where things are eroding our mitochondrial health and they need to be, the debt needs to be paid at some point. Otherwise, you end up with sluggish mitochondria. What happens then? You feel tired. You're brain fogged. You're more likely to have high blood sugar, insulin resistance, gain weight, fertility issues, the list goes on and on. Mitochondria is inside every single cell in your body, apart from red blood cell. That's how important it is, right? It takes the food that we eat and turn it into energy so that the cell can function. So in the brain, it's, that cell helps you think. Without that energy in the form of ATP, you cannot think. You can't memorize anything. So mitochondria function, in my opinion, underlies most chronic diseases. And that's kind of like the root. When we're talking about why does ultra-processed food make us tired or, make us sick? It's damaging the mitochondria. Mm. Why do environmental toxins affect our fertility? It's damaging our mitochondria. Why do environmental toxins affect children's behavior, attention? Mitochondria. And so if you have a modality that can address that and kind of charge up the mitochondria to mitigate some of these damages, that's kind of why it seems like snake oil at first because it can do so much. But it's because it's tackling the very root of so many different conditions. And I'm no stranger to light. So I did a stint in dermatology, as I told you earlier. So that was at St. John's, one of the top institutes of dermatology in the world, where I used PUVA to treat psoriasis. We used lasers to treat skin conditions. So I knew light can be therapeutic, but I didn't really know the benefit of red light until my dad had this really painful muscular condition where he was bedbound. And I gave him this red light device I was using on my skin to help me with wrinkles. And he used it after a week. He got up and walked and his pain was gone.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's when I really took it seriously and dug into research and realized, there's over 2,000 published studies now on red light therapy on anything from wrinkles, boosting your collagen, acne, hair growth, to wound healing, recovery, athletic gains. There's so many different things that it can impact.
When I was opening up the box, my wife was right there. She was like, "Ooh, what is that?" And, when I shared with her, of course, I opened it up and I told her what it was. She was like, "Oh, I use this because my wife has like the best skin ever." Mm. All right. Shout out to her, my mother-in-law too, by the way, who's listening. I'm sure she's listening, but they're from Kenya and just having, just the good genetics, of course, but. And
your food.
And the good food too, but she does occasionally get like this really fancy facial done, know, and she was like, "Oh yeah, they use this when I had the facial done."
Yes.
And I'm just like, really? Like I had no idea. You never, she never told me about that.
Yes.
And it's just like, again, these kind of pricey things are now more accessible for folks every day to utilize for a plethora of different reasons. And that's really why I was using my friend's red light therapy bed, was recovering from an injury about a year ago. And again, just the thing that I noticed, it wasn't necessarily just with the recovery, but I just felt like more of and this was my experience, like a meditative state, having that red light treatment. I don't know if you've heard anything like that.
Yeah, so there's studies showing that it can help with endorphin production. And so mood, it can help with mood as well. So maybe that's what kind of you're
definitely
tapping
felt
into.
Lighter and just a better mood.
Yeah, it definitely puts me in a good mood. And, those beds are great. They're $100,000.
Yeah.
But if you're treating, let's say, a localized injury, getting into the bed is almost kind of overkill. And you might get too much light. Like you're trying to treat one area for 20 minutes, for example, and you're in that all over body bed for 20 minutes, you're putting too much red light into your body. And red light therapy is kind of like exercise, right? You want to exercise the right amount because that right amount is a stimulus for your body to produce beneficial compounds, right? Like antioxidants. So you want just the right amount of light too. You don't want too much because that can actually cause, oxidative damage. I'm talking about with full body. So, you'll see those full body ones, they tell you don't go in it for too long, 5-6 minutes at a time.
And that's the great thing too. With the Loom Box, it has like the timers, different settings. And also it's not just the red light therapy. It also has the infrared
Right.
as well.
Exactly.
So you get like this double impact.
Yeah. So red is great for surface conditions. So for your skin, for example, hair. But if you want that light to penetrate into your deeper tissues like joints, muscles, you need really near infrared light because that penetrates so much better. So that's why I wanted a device where each bulb can emit both red and near infrared at the same time.
Now, with this being said, this isn't just something that you share with me. This is something that you actually helped to develop.
Right.
You know, you are a big part of this. And it just makes sense, again, just with your knowledge base and like the little things that are added. And it's so easy to use too. And you guys sent me this little stand. So if I wanted to, do a treatment, for example, maybe a sore muscle, or maybe, if there is an injury, like you could just set it up, or you can also, there's like a handheld thing you could actually use as well to just, or if you're doing the skin, right? Yep. So just doing the red light therapy for your face, for, as you mentioned, really helping to reduce the incidence of what we put this category of signs of aging. Mm-hmm. It's really, really remarkable. So can you talk about the Loom Box in particular?
Yeah, definitely. Talking about skin, there's some really great clinical studies done now on skin using red light therapy and LED-based devices like Loom Box, not lasers anymore. So traditionally it used to be lasers, which is, you can only get it in a doctor's office. But now it's done with LED-based devices, and they do these split phase studies. Those kind of like the best study, right? Because it's fully controlled. It's on the same person, but they only do red light therapy to one side of the face, mm-hmm. and they compare it to the other side. And then you can see dramatic difference in appearances after 6 to 8 weeks. And they even have proven with skin biopsies, there's increased collagen production on the side that's treated. So it's not just visible, it's, you can show it histologically as well. But the reason why I founded Loom Box is because this device that I had my dad use was so weak. I was reading the research around how much light energy you actually need for different types of injuries or different benefits. It's much more than what this device gave. So I was telling him to use it on himself for an hour up to 2 hours a day. Now, he has time. He's retired and he was bedbound, so he didn't mind that. But most people are not going to do that. Yeah. Right? Who has time to sit there for an hour? So I wanted to look for a device that had more power, and I couldn't find one. I wanted one that was portable. So you definitely can get your friends, fancy full body that's very powerful, but that's not accessible. I wanted something accessible and easy to use in the form of a portable device that you can use when you're sitting down watching TV, or you're reading, or you're in your car, right? I take it with my kids to their tennis tournaments in the car. They use it on, during matches as well. So I had to make one myself. And so I spec'd the kind of irradiance I wanted based on all the studies I've read of what kind of is the optimal for most people. Now, everybody's different. So there's a bell-shaped curve, right? So we're talking about the middle. Like some people need less, some people still need more. So that's why I give this guide and education around how to use it. So you want to adjust it for yourself. But it's much more powerful. So I third-party tested it in a lab to show the irradiance. So most devices on the market, they use a handheld light meter to show the irradiance, and that's not accurate. I also care about EMF because if you're talking about infrared light, EMF is, can be a concern. So I third-party tested for that too, and it's low for that. And I wanted something slightly bigger that if I, put it a distance away, it can kind of cover my entire face and neck as well. So I made something a little bit bigger with a much bigger battery life, much more power irradiance. And I put a timer in for kind of the optimal dose for most people for ease of use.
And if people go to the website, you can see all of these great stories, these before and afters, and people love the Loom Box. It's really, really remarkable.
Thank you.
And I didn't know you were going to do this. Like you told me that you were going to hook us up with something special. And I didn't know what it was going to be, but can you share that?
Yeah. So as you were mentioning it, I mean, I didn't even know you loved it until you told me you did. And then I was like, well, why don't we offer something special for your audience? So if you go to www.theloombox.com/model, you can get $280 off Loombox right now for the next 2 weeks.
So usually, of course, you give certain people a little discount, all right, but not $280 off. All right. So that is exceptional for us. It's for a limited time.
Yeah.
By the way, again, but we'll still have a discount long term. I'm sure that I could, finesse with you, but for a limited time, $280 off. That's super cool. Thank you for doing that for us.
Of course.
Again, go to The Loombox. That's TheLoombox.com/model. $280 off for a limited time. Take advantage. This is one of those things that we're just going to keep seeing more and more science coming out about red light therapy. And of course, you get the infrared all in one. Super valuable asset to have. I saw a lot of people using it actually pre-workout as well as another.
So studies have shown that when you use red light therapy before working out, it increases endurance in athletes. So you can actually have more reps as well if you're working out, trying to do resistance training. And there's less soreness afterwards. And if I know I'm working on a group of muscles and I'm increasing my weight and I'm going to be sore, I would use it after I've gone to the gym.
And we've had so many incredible experts here on specifically the science around building muscle and, even the opposite, sarcopenia. Soreness, unfortunately, because of our programming, we think that's the indicator of muscular change. It's not about the soreness. Like we can actually damage ourselves and make it harder to recover and not get as much benefit because we can't train because we're so sore. It's really about efficiency and getting in high quality reps, high quality volume that's at the right amount. And so being able to utilize different, right now, again, is so cool because we have access to simple technology that's portable, that supports efficient training and recovery. That's what we get with Loombox. And also, but for me right now, it's really about the skin health. And that's really what I've been studying. And just
you have great skin too.
Stop it. Stop it. Thank you. Well, again, everybody, make sure to check that out and just check you out in general. What's a good place for people to follow you?
Oh, thank you so much. So on Instagram, I'm at plateful.health. So that's plateful.health. I also have a website. So that's www.platefulhealth.com.
Awesome. Well, this has been awesome and so insightful. I want to talk to you more. I've got more questions. So, I know you took a trip to come to get here today. And so hopefully the next time, if we can line this up to hang out and to have you back,
I'd love to.
Your experience, your insights, your dedication to education and sharing what you know with everybody is really special. And I immediately connected with you. And it's just, you're one of my favorite people to follow on social media as well.
That's so kind.
I just appreciate you. Thank you.
You're one of my favorite people too. You have a great podcast that is changing lives. So thank you for your work.
Awesome. Well, I received that. Everybody, make sure to check out Dr. Vivian Chen. Appreciate you for hanging out with us. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
The best and most potent way that you can activate the brown fat is by cold. It has everything to do with keeping you warm.